Hello. It is my honor and privilege to introduce the author Anna Baar to you today. Anna Baar, who is the author of The Color of the Pomegranate, published in 2015 and translated as partially for Festival Neue Literatur this year. And although Anna and I have not met in person and are doing our recordings asynchronously, it still feels like we're working together. So I'm really excited to be in conversation with her today. Anna was born in 1973 in Zagreb and grew up between the Croatian region of Dalmatia and Austria. She has been writing fiction, essays, and poetry since 2012, and her novel, the novel we'll be reading from, The Color of the Pomegranate, was published in 2015 and shortlisted for the Ingeborg Bachmann Prize in that same year. Her second novel, Als ob sie träumend gingen, or As if they were walking in a dream, was published in 2017 and received the Theodor Körner Prize. She lives in Vienna and Klagenfurt. I want to also note some personal reflections on working on this novel with Anna, which came to me as a translator in developing my own relationship with the text. So Anna, as the child of a mother who is Croatian and a father who is Austrian, grew up in a sense in between worlds, in between languages and codes, and in a sense also between a lost world and a contemporary world. And this is very much what this beautifully lyrical novel explores. In the same way, my mother is actually from former East Germany and my father is from America. So in that way, I had a very personal connection to the novel and to understanding the protagonist's relationship to recovering this lost world, the world of her childhood, the world of Yugoslavia that her family grows up in, or that her grandmother at least is part of, and understanding how to navigate that world, how to find its traces in one's everyday life, where it goes once it has disappeared from the historical record, and how it lives on in people's hearts and minds. It's particularly exciting today to hear Anna herself read from her novel. I think that once one hears an author read their own work, you discover the rhythms and the cadences that the text was really intended for, and it brings a new kind of dimension of life into the work. So I'm very excited about that. And perhaps lastly, I will just note that this novel, I feel, is quite special in its contemporary attention to lyrical detail and hybrid regions and hybrid lives, perhaps in the way that V.G. Sebald was in some of his works. I'm thinking here particularly of Austerlitz and the Rings of Saturn, and the kind of lyrical blending of memory and lived experience and imagination together, which her novel so beautifully illustrates. And I can say that as a translator, it has been a real pleasure working on this in English and trying to make it come alive and speak in the same way for an English language audience. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you this way. First of all, please let me say a few words to my fabulous translator Sophie Duvernoy. Sophie, most of German-speaking readers struggle to read my books. So I feel honored and deeply, deeply touched whenever someone finds the courage to translate one of them at all. You did it, and you did a great job. I want to thank you very much for this. wonderful. Yeah, I'm amazed by your sense of language and your great sense of atmosphere. Sophie Duvernoy is not only an excellent translator, but she won the Gute Kunst Prize awarded by the Goethe Institute in New York a few years ago. I think it was in 2015. I hope I'm right. Yeah, and she's not only an excellent translator, she's also a PhD, I think it's called, candidate in Yale's German department, and she is a graduate of Harvard. Thank you again, and I hope we will have the opportunity to meet each other someday, very soon, I hope, and please stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you. I was asked to say a few words about my novel, The Color of the Pomegranate. It's not very easy for me to talk about my writing. I guess critics are much better in that than me. I'm afraid to talk about plots because writing for me is a struggle and an act of love with language. Maybe I can say it this way. Difficult to say what it's about. I'll try to find a few explanations for you. It's my first novel. Critics and readers think it's pretty autobiographical, and I have to admit it is. It is about growing up. It is maybe a coming-of-age novel between unkindly opposing cultures and childhood scenes, which are very different in their not only in the culture but also in the landscapes. Yeah. The child, every summer the child spends the time far away from its Austrian home on an island in former Yugoslavia, in the care of her grandmother. On one hand, it's paradise for the child, but it's also strange and very different from the sheltered life in Austria, where Yugoslavs appear mainly as guest workers, you can say. The novel takes place in the early 1980s, and 3 decades after the Second World War. It's still sold that in former Yugoslavia the Tito was alive, and they still celebrate the victory over the Germans, but the Germans came as paying tourists at that time, and this was and on the other side, on the other hand, in Austria, it was there were guest workers, as I said. The conflict between the two cultures was maybe strange, but no, it became most evident maybe as far as the language is concerned, because my own grandmother, hated the German language, and in Austria people hated Croatian language. So you see, it's a novel about search for identity and also about speechlessness and language empowerment. Dann kam der Sommer, in dem sie nicht mehr kam. In meinem Alter bleibt man besser in der Nähe eines Krankenhauses, sagte sie am Telefon, und ich legte wütend auf und warf das Telefon gegen die Wand und heulte laut auf, weil ich begriff, dass unser Flecken Erde unbeseelt bliebe, dieser Flecken Erde, dem sie wie durch einen über ihre leibliche Dimension hinausgewucherten Kreislauf ein eingewurzeltes, sich in Mauern und Erdstaub drängendes Adergeflecht eingefleischt war. Der endgültige Auszug aus ihrem Weltenteil erschien mir wie ein unfertiges Sterben. Ich war trostlos und erleichtert. Zum ersten Mal die Aussicht auf einen Sommer ohne Todesangst und Krieg. In diesem Sommer spielte das Wetter verrückt. Nach zahllosen Tropentagen kühlte es ab, verstummten die Zikaden, regnete es in Strömen, plätscherte und gurgelte es in den Dachrinnen und Abflüssen und Zisternen, ein launenhaftes Konzert der Schlag- und Rieselinstrumente, ein Tröpfeln, Murmeln, dann ein Brausen, Stürzen und Drängen, wie tosender Applaus. Die Erde duftete, atmete, brachte ihre winzigen Geschöpfe ans Licht, ein Festmahl für Echsen und Amseln, Wildtauben und Spatzen, die es mit hingebungsvollen die Klangkulisse des Prasselregens zart durchbebenden Gesängen dankten, Spitzen pfiffen, einem Rufen und Gurren, immer, wie man sagt, conspiritor. Der erhitzte Boden dampfte, dass sich dichte Nebel über den Landstrich legten, und in der feuchten, warmen Luft lag ein Keimen, ein ungezügeltes Austreiben, Knospen und Erblühen, ein Zu-sich-Kommen, gerade so, als habe die Schöpfung nach einem Fieberwahn das Bewusstsein für ihre Bestimmung wiedererlangt. Nur für die Blumen in den Trögen auf der Veranda und auf den Terrassen kamen Regen und Abkühlung zu spät. Sie waren verdorrt, die Armen, deren Empfindsamkeit gegen Sonne und Hitze nah das Beharrlichkeit und Trotz erst recht heraufbeschworen hatten, und Usachnuti, ein so trostloses Wort für das Sterben, dass man nicht anders konnte, als sich gegen alle Lebensgesetze aufzulehnen, und ginge es auch nur um ein paar schwächliche Pflänzchen, die man sich ihrer Schönheit wegen in den Kopf gesetzt hatte, und koste es auch das von Mund und Balg abgesparte Wasser. Nicht einmal das Haus ist von Bestand. Die Ameisen und Termiten höhlen die Stehbalken der Lauben und den Handlauf des schmiedeeisernen Geländers weiter aus, bringen in unaufhörlichen Arbeitskolonnen Holzmehl daraus hervor, häufen es in einer Ecke der Veranda zu kleinen Hügeln auf. Im Schein meiner Zigarettenglut leuchte ich die toten Winkel der Erinnerung aus, sehe ich nader den verwitterten Handlauf streichen, auch die Stehbalken und Fensterläden, Farbspritzer auf der Hausmauer, Farbspritzer auf dem weißen Marmorboden, Schweißperlen auf ihrer Stirn. Immer sehe ich sie bei der Arbeit, im Widerstand gegen den Zahn der Zeit und den Wildwuchs der Gräser. Und doch, wie sich das Meer in den stürmischen Wintern die Strände holt, holt sich der Zerfall wie über Nacht alles Hab und Gut. Der Garten flicht sein Halm- und Blätterwerk um ihre Mühen, das verdorrende Lustgefilde, die vor Hitze sich ringelnden Zungen, da barim Kishapadne, wenn es doch nur regnete. Irgendwer hat sie erhört. Wie muss ihr zumute gewesen sein? Sie brauchte dem Garten nur den Rücken zu kehren, nur für einen Tag unaufmerksam sein, dann fuhr er seine Sporne aus und hielt alles zurück, wofür sie sich geschunden hatte. Schon wuchs ein Kräutlein, wo gestern erst gerupft worden war, schon schlang sich Efeu um den Mandelbaum, schon waren die Aschereste von der Feuerstelle über den Boden verstreut, wo sie eben noch gekehrt hatte. Sie reißt und zupft mit bloßen Händen, mit den Fingern, den bis aufs Blut geschundenen, die Ranken und Kräuter einsam stöhnend unter Gelsenstichen und Distelstichen, die Zigarette im Mundwinkel, Stoßgebete wie Flüche zischend, sich den Schweiß schon frühmorgens mit den erdigen Handrücken von der Stirne wischend, Erde unter den Fingernägeln, Speile in den Sohlen der Schlappen und alles Widrige in den henkellosen Plastikeimer, den sie, wenn sie sich unbeobachtet fühlt, in den Nachbargarten entleert. Und wer weiß, vielleicht schlichen sich die Mahnen längst auch an sie heran, belauerten sie rücklings, hauchten ihr leise über die Frisur, wenn sie sich bückte und jätete und paffte und die Asche zu Boden fiel. Zu Staub sollst auch du werden? Vielleicht in jenen Momenten, da ihr die Luft knapp wurde und sie missmutig zu uns herübersah, weil wir nicht behilflich waren, obwohl ihr alles über den Kopf wuchs.
All right, I'm going to read the same excerpt now and then continue on for a little bit. Then the summer arrived, when she stopped coming. At my age, it's best to be near a hospital, she said on the phone. I hung up in fury and threw the phone against the wall and wailed, because I understood that our patch of earth would remain lifeless, this patch of earth into which she had seeped, as if through a bloodstream branching wildly beyond her own bodily dimensions, a deep web of veins forcing its way through foundations and dirt. Her final departure from this corner of the world seemed to me like a premature death. I was inconsolable and relieved. For the first time, I had the prospect of a summer without fear and war. That summer, the weather went haywire. After countless days of tropical heat, it cooled. The cicadas fell silent. The rain streamed down, splashing and gurgling over the roofs and in the gutters and cisterns, a moody percussive concert, trickling, dripping, babbling, then roaring, rushing, and thundering like wild applause. The earth exuded its scent, breathed, and brought forth its tiny creatures, a feast for lizards and blackbirds, wild pigeons and sparrows, who gave thanks in reverential songs, which drifted gently through the din of the pattering drops, shrill whistles, calls and coos, always, as one says, conspirator. The warm earth steamed, so that thick fog rolled over the land, and in the hot, humid air lay a stirring, a wild sprouting, budding and blooming, a return to oneself, just as if creation had, after a feverish delirium, recalled its purpose again. But for the potted flowers on the veranda and the terraces, the rain and cool air came too late. The poor things, whose sensitivity to sun and heat had incited Nada's doggedness and defiance, were withered, usachnuti, such a bleak word for death that she could not help but revolt against the laws of nature, if only for the sake of a few sickly plants which she had latched onto because of their beauty, that they drank up precious water meant for throat and hide. Even the house is crumbling. Ants and termites hollow out the beams of the pergola and the handrail of the wrought iron fence. Endless streams of workers carry out sawdust and heap it into small mounds in the corner of the veranda. The light of my glowing cigarette illuminates the blind spots of my memory, and I see Nada painting the weathered handrail, the beams, the window frames, splashes of paint on the walls of the house, splashes of paint on the white marble floor, pearls of sweat on her brow. I see her working, always working, fighting against the ravages of time and the grasses growing wild. Yet, just like the ocean swallows the shore during stormy winters, decay spreads, as if overnight, over all things. The garden twines its stems and leaves around her efforts, the withering pleasure garden, its tongues curling in the heat. Da barem qui s'apadne, if only it would rain. Someone heard her plea. What she must have felt! She had only to turn her back on the garden for a day, and it would send out shoots and ruin everything she had worked so hard for. A weed was growing in the spot she had just weeded yesterday. Ivy snaked around the almond tree. The ashes from the fire were scattered across the floor, even though they had just been swept up. She yanks and rips at the vines and weeds with bare hands. Her fingers rubbed raw and blundy, grumbling alone at the mosquito bites and thistle pricks, a cigarette in the corner of her mouth, flinging out quick prayers like curses, wiping her brow, sweaty already by early morning, with the dirt-covered back of her hand, dirt under her fingernails, splinters in the soles of her slippers, refuse in the plastic bucket missing its handle, which she would, when she felt no one was watching, empty in the neighbor's garden. And who knows? Perhaps phantoms had long since crept up on her, stalked her, quietly whispered into her ear as she bent down and weeded and puffed, and ash fell to the ground. To dust you too shall return. Perhaps they did so in those moments when she grew short of breath and looked over at us sullenly, because we didn't lift a finger, though everything had grown beyond her control. Mother, Teta, and I couldn't keep up Nada's dogged struggle against desiccation and overgrowth, this rebellion against God's plan. For many years we reproached her with fussing over the house and garden, partly to mask our own laziness, which was perhaps more reluctance, because everything had to happen according to Nada's wishes, because she had taken everything upon herself while claiming to do it all for us, to work and suffer only for us, for the children. Had she ever asked me? Oh, generosity and kindness, the last morsel of yesterday's bread, mother's blood, pain, all for us, as if her pain hadn't also been ours. You didn't suffer for me, Nada, but against me, not for my sake, but for my harm. Now, idleness set in, as if we wanted to prove to each other that we were right, and Nada was wrong. We neglected the scraggly flowers, let the lavender grow wild, justified the leaves underfoot by claiming the garden needed a layer of humus anyway. When the rain finally relented after days, we haphazardly sawed at the olive branches hanging over the garden path, which year after year had lovingly scratched our faces and mussed our hair. After weeks of lethargy, Mother and Teta were gripped by a curious frenzy of activity. They outdid each other in disposing of this and that junk Nada had stubbornly clung to until the end. They were like children who secretly enjoyed turning the house on its head while their strict governess was away. There was no one shuffling after them now, no one throwing her hands up in despair. Free rein, at last! Eagerly they stuffed sticky, smeared pickle jars filled with flour, sugar, lentils, spices, and jams, along with hundreds of empty yogurt cups, into plastic bags, as well as pots and pans of all sizes, canned fish from the 90s, even the broken, discarded crisper drawer of the Obodine de Luxe Frigidaire, and the standing fan which had given up the ghost. But no one had the heart to get rid of a single one of the garden gnomes. We children had bought her, glad that Nada could be so easily made happy, though we mocked her love of kitsch. How could we have persuaded her to let go of this girlish indulgence, which embarrassed her, but which she couldn't give up? These were fruitless days. The figs were ready to be picked, but we let them wither. The weeds had to be pulled, but they took over. Nada was gone, gone from every room and nook, from every space, every plant, every stone of this overgrown garden, even from the butterfly wings and larvae, from the spirals of the empty snail shells which had been my trophies long ago. One day, when I'm no longer here, you'll know how good you had it. Thank you very much for joining us today for this reading. We hope you enjoyed it, and we wish you well in these difficult times. Be well and take care.